The shocking physics experiment that exposed our hidden strength. Chapter 1. The routine beginning. Dr. Claire Hawthorne adjusted her glasses, her fingers typing quickly on the data console in front of her. The sterile lab buzzed softly, with the sound of high-tech machines designed to measure every possible detail of human physiology. Behind the large glass window, Tom Fields, the subject of today's experiment, sat waiting. His legs were strapped to a specialized force-measuring device, and his hands gripped two handles that would monitor his arm strength. "Ready to begin, Dr. Hawthorne?" asked Elena, the lab assistant, who was just as eager as Claire to start the day's test. She was fresh out of her doctorate program in biophysics, and always excited to contribute. "Let's begin," Claire said, nodding at Elena, who promptly initiated the software. Tom gave a quick thumbs up. In his mid-30s, he was an average man, fit but by no means an athlete. This experiment, though simple on the surface, was a part of a larger study focused on understanding human strength under controlled conditions. Claire's goal was to measure muscle output under varying degrees of resistance and document how fatigue affected endurance and power. "All set, Toms." Claire's voice echoed through the intercom into the chamber where Tom sat. "Ready when you are," Tom replied, sounding calm and confident. Claire pressed a button on her console, activating the machine. "All right, begin applying pressure to the pedals, and we'll gradually increase the resistance." Tom braced himself and started pushing against the machine with his legs. The initial readings were normal, just as expected. His muscles flexed and strained with the effort, but there was nothing extraordinary about the results. The machine would slowly increase the resistance every 30 seconds until Tom couldn't push anymore. As Claire monitored the data flowing in, her brow furrowed slightly. It was a minor anomaly at first. Tom's muscle force was holding steadier than usual. Normally, the output would start declining as fatigue set in, but his readings remained unexpectedly consistent. "Elena, double-check those sensor readings, would you?" Claire asked, her fingers tapping against the desk. Elena frowned but quickly ran a diagnostic on the equipment. "Everything's working perfectly," she said. Strange, Claire thought. This was supposed to be a standard experiment. "Let's increase the resistance," Claire said. Elena nodded and made the adjustment. The machine applied more force, and Tom's muscles visibly strained as he pushed harder. Yet the readings didn't drop. Instead, they climbed. His muscle output was rising, defying their expectations. "Is this normal?" Tom asked through the intercom, his voice strained but still steady. "We're not sure," Claire replied, trying to hide her growing concern. "Just keep going." Minutes passed, and something remarkable began to happen. Tom wasn't slowing down. His strength seemed to be growing, even as the resistance increased to levels that should have been impossible for someone of his physical stature to handle. He was sweating and gritting his teeth, but the data showed that his force output was continuing to rise. Chapter 2. The first sign of something extraordinary. Claire couldn't believe what she was seeing. According to their calculations, Tom should have reached his limit long ago. Yet somehow his strength was still climbing. "Elena, increase the resistance again," Claire said, her tone sharper now. She didn't want to panic, but the implications of what they were witnessing were staggering. Elena hesitated. "Dr. Hawthorne, are you sure?" "This is." "Do it," Claire insisted, cutting her off. Elena complied, her fingers shaking as she entered the new parameters. The machine whirred, ramping up the force against Tom's legs and arms. His body tensed, his face scrunching up with the effort. For a brief moment, Claire thought she saw his muscles twitch unnaturally beneath his skin. "He shouldn't be able to handle this," Elena whispered, her eyes wide as she stared at the numbers. "His muscle output is off the charts. It was impossible. No human being should have been able to generate that kind of force, not without specialized training or perhaps even enhancements." And yet, Tom was doing it, with no sign of stopping. The door to the observation room slid open, and Dr. Alan Simmons, another senior researcher, walked in. He had been monitoring the experiment from the control room and had clearly seen the same data that was confusing Claire and Elena. "What's going on here?" Alan asked, his brow furrowed as he glanced at the screen. "This is beyond what we've documented in human strength." "I don't know," Claire admitted. but we need to see how far he can go. This could be something unprecedented. Alan nodded grimly, his eyes darting between the data and the lab, where Tom was now visibly shaking with exertion. The shocking physics experiment that exposed our hidden strength. Chapter 3. Strength Unlocked. Tom's breathing became labored, and his muscles were visibly flexing beyond what any of them thought possible. His body was shaking, but not in the way someone would tremble with fatigue. It was as if his muscles were awakening to something new, pushing his body into an overdrive that no one had anticipated. Dr. Hawthorne, the resistance is at 400% of normal capacity, Elena said nervously. We should stop before something goes wrong. But Claire shook her head. We're witnessing something groundbreaking. We can't stop now. In the lab, Tom let out a strained grunt. His legs were quivering as he continued pushing, and the veins in his arms bulged with effort. The machine was groaning under the pressure, but the sensors continued to record incredible data. Tom's force output had reached levels that rivaled elite athletes, and it was still increasing. I can't hold this much longer, Tom shouted, his voice cracking with strain. Claire hesitated for the first time. She had pushed the experiment to its limits, but at what cost? Was she endangering Tom by pushing him beyond what was safe? All right, stop the test, she called, her hand hovering over the emergency shut-off switch. But before she could press it, something extraordinary happened. Tom let out a guttural scream, and his entire body seemed to erupt with power. The machine groaned under the strain as Tom's muscles flexed, surpassing even their highest predictions. It wasn't just his strength that was growing. It was as if he had unlocked a hidden reservoir of power that no human should possess. The machine buckled, and the handles snapped, unable to withstand the force Tom was exerting. Metal twisted and cables snapped, sending sparks flying across the room. Tom collapsed back into the chair, gasping for air, his body trembling with exhaustion. The room fell silent, save for the crackling of broken machinery. No one moved. No one spoke. Claire stared at Tom in disbelief. What had just happened?